An interesting way to start us talking about Vietnam is for me to read a story of this primary evidence. So all I want you to do is listen to this story, okay? When we get done with the story, we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to review some of the things we learned about Vietnam in terms of like the Eisenhower stuff, and then we'll move forward today, probably finishing Vietnam tomorrow. A lot of what we're going to be talking about isn't just what happens in Vietnam, it's what's happening in America because of Vietnam. Yes. Okay. Oh, well, whatever. Okay. All right, that's right. Tomorrow during your class, I just get a planning period. That's pretty awesome. Okay, so this one is called No Crime is a Crime During War. And I want you to listen to what this guy's saying, not just what he's saying, but I want you to listen to how old he is and the experiences he's having. All right? Raise your hand if you're 17 in here. All right, keep that in mind. Okay. I went to Vietnam as a basic, naive young man of 18. Before I reached my 19th birthday, I was an animal. When I went home, even my mother was scared of me. Being from a hardcore neighborhood, I decided I was going to volunteer for the toughest combat training they had. I went to jump school, ranger school, and special forces training. I figured I was just what my country needed. A black patriot who could do any physical job they come up with. 6 feet, 190 pounds, and healthy. I didn't ask no questions about the war. I thought communism was spreading, and as an American citizen, it was my part to do as much as I could to defeat the communists from coming over here. Whatever America states is correct was the tradition I was brought up in. Then came the second week of February 1969. This was like 3 days after a helicopter go down in some very, obviously this guy's speaking and I'm reading what he's saying, I'm not reading as the language. This is like 3 days after we had a helicopter go down in some heavy foliage where they couldn't find no survivors from the air. We were directed to find the wreckage and report back. Then see if we can find any enemy movement and find any prisoners. We're heading north. It took us 10 hours to get to the location. The helicopter, it was stripped. All the weaponry was gone and there was no bodies. It looked like the helicopter had been shot out of the air. It had numerous holes in it, bullet holes in it, but it hadn't exploded. The major frame was still intact. We reconned the area and we came across this fella, a white guy, who was staked to the ground. His arms and legs staked down to stakes, tied down to stakes. He had a band around his neck that staked in the ground so he couldn't move his head left or right. He had numerous scars on his face where he might have been beaten and mutilated. And then he had been peeled from his upper part of his chest down to his waist, skinned, like they slit your skin with a knife. They take a pair of pliers or an instrument similar, and they peel the skin off your body and expose it to the elements. I came to the conclusion that he had no significant value to them, so they tortured him and left him out to die. The man was within a couple hours of dying on his own. So I got there, he was still living. We didn't know what to do because we couldn't move him. There was no means. We had no stretcher. There was only 6 of us, and we went out with the basic idea that there were no survivors. We was even afraid to unstake him from the stakes because of the maggots and flies were eating the exposed flesh so much. The man had maggots in his armpits and maggots in his throat and maggots in his stomach. You could actually see the open wounds of his intestines and parts in the inner workings being exposed to the weather. You can see the flesh holes that animals, the wild dogs, rats, field mice, and the insects had eaten through his body. With the blood loss that he had had, it was a miracle the man was still alive, but he was just a shell of a person. The things that he had went through for those 3 days, and all that humidity too. I wouldn't want another human being to have to go through that. It was a heavy shock on all of us to find the guy staked out alive. With an open belly wound, we couldn't give him any water, and we didn't have any morphine. And he started crying, begging to die. He said, I can't go back like this. I can't live like this. I'm dying. You can't leave me here like this dying. It was a situation where we had to remove him from his bondage or remove him from his suffering. Removing him from his bondage was unfeasible. It would have put more pain than he had ever endured, and there wasn't no use talking about trying to take him back because there was nothing left of him. It was that or kill the brother, and I use the term brother because in a work circumstance, we're all brothers. The man pleaded not only to myself but to the other members of my team to end his suffering. He made the plea for about half an hour because we couldn't decide what to do. He kept saying, the mother blankers did this to me. Please kill me. I'm in pain. I'm in agony. Kill me. You got to find him. You got to find him. Kill the sorry blanks. Kill those mother blanks. I called headquarters and told them basically the condition of the man, the pleas the man was giving me, and our situation at the time. We had no way of bringing him back. They couldn't get to us fast enough. And we had another mission to go on. Headquarters stated it was in charge of it was up to me what had to be done because I was in charge. They just said, "It's your responsibility." I asked the team to leave. It took me somewhere close to 20 minutes to get my mind together. Not because I was squeamish about killing somebody, because at the time I had numerous body counts. Killing somebody wasn't the issue. It was killing another American citizen, another GI. I put myself in his situation, in his place. I had to be as strong as he was, because he was asking me to kill him, to wipe out his life. He had to be a hell of a man to do that, and I don't think I would be hell of enough a man to be able to do that. I said to myself, I couldn't show him my weakness because he was showing me his strength. The only thing I could see that had to be done was to end the man's suffering. I put my M16 next to his head, next to his temple. I said, "Are you sure you want me to do this?" He said, "Man, kill me. Thank you." I stopped thinking, I just pulled the trigger, and I canceled his suffering. When the team came back, we talked nothing about it. We buried him, and we buried him very deep. And then I cried. When we first started going in the fields, I would not wear a finger, an ear, or mutilate another person's body, until I had the misfortune to come upon some American soldiers who were castrated. Then it got to be a game between the communists and ourselves to see how many fingers and ears we could capture from each other. After a kill, we would cut off a finger or an ear as a trophy, stuff our unit patch in his mouth, and let him die. I collected about 14 ears and fingers. With them strung on a piece of leather around my neck, I could go downtown and I would get free drugs, free booze, free sex, because they wouldn't want to bother you because you're a killer. It symbolized that I was a killer, and it was, so to speak, a symbol of combat-type manhood. One night we were in the fields on maneuvers, and we seen some lights. We were investigating the lights, and we found out it was a Vietnamese girl going from one location to another. We caught her and did what they call a gang rape. She submitted freely because she felt if she had submitted freely, she wouldn't have gotten killed. We couldn't do nothing else but kill her because we couldn't jeopardize the mission. You was either kill or be killed yourself the next day. If you let her go, she's going to warn somebody you're in the area, and then your cover is blown, and your mission is blown, and nothing comes before the mission. Nothing. You could kill 1,000 folks, but you still had to complete your mission. The mission is the ultimate goal, and if you failed in that mission, then you were a failure as a soldier. And we were told that there would be no prisoners, so we eliminated her. Cut her throat so she couldn't be heard, so the enemy wouldn't know you were in the area. After a while, it really bothered me. I started saying to myself, what would I do if somebody did that to me or my child or to my mother? I would kill him. Or I would say, why in the hell did I take this? Or why in the hell did I do that? Because I basically became an animal. Not to say that I was involved, but I had turned my back, which made me just as guilty as anybody else. Because I was in charge of a group of animals, and I had to be the biggest animal there. And I allowed things to happen. I learned not to care, and I didn't care. With 89 days left in country, I came out of the field. At the time you're in the field, you don't feel anything about what you're doing. At the time you have to yourself, you sit back and you sort of ponder. What I now felt was emptiness. Here I am, I'm still 18 years old. I'm a young man with basically everything in his life to look forward to, over here in a foreign country with people who have everything I think I should have. They have the right to fight, and they fought for what they thought was right. I started to recapture some of my old values. I was a passionate young man before I came to the Army. I believe that you respect other people's lives as much as I respect my own. I got to thinking I had killed around 40 people personally, and maybe others in firefights that I hadn't seen. I was really thinking there are people in this world who won't ever see their children or their grandchildren. I started seeing the atrocities that we caused other human beings. I came to realize this was committing crimes against humanity and myself. I didn't believe in the things that I was doing, and I changed. I stopped wearing ears and fingers. And the rest of the stuff he talks about is like from my life, which we haven't got yet, so we won't have any context. But I thought I would read this and sort of give some discussion about what was going on. What did you think about when you were hearing some of this stuff?
Brutal.
It was not just the communists or the Americans, it was both sides, but it did get to be a game. Many of them would shoot somebody and castrate them and stick their stuff in someone's mouth and you died on your own stuff. That was a way to humiliate them. Jungle fighting is brutal, right? It's brutal. And it turns people who are good people into, like, how did he describe himself? That he had become an animal, right? And he was only 18. He was your age. He was a year older than you guys. It wasn't like he was an old man doing this. On Wednesday, I guess it is, there's a lot of YouTube stuff I want to show you guys about napalm, we're at the end of the Vietnam War stuff, and a couple things that are pretty cool. the one thing that's different about this war, though, before we go forward, is that this is the first war, in fact it's the only war, where the media was allowed to be there. Like, every night you saw people coming in from the jungle on stretchers holding their stuff in, they're screaming. There were times, and I'll show you one, they're literally in a firefight interviewing guys who are like talking to the reporter as they're reloading their magazines. And this was also by far the war where we had the most outrage against the war, the most protests against the war, and many people in the Defense Department thought that one reason why was because everyone saw it, right? In World War II, do you think things like this happened in World War II?
Yeah.
I'm sure it did, but why don't we talk about it?
Nobody saw it.
Because it wasn't on TV, and so people felt loud saying to talk about it. Also, one thing, you heard him say, I had 89 days in country left. Your tour of duty was 1 year. In World War II, you were there until it ended, right? In Vietnam, you were there for 1 year terms. Now, other people might have done more than one tour. So many people did. But a lot of people who were drafted especially just had their one tour of duty. My cousin Billy had one tour of duty. He was a tunnel rat, and I'll talk about him, because he has a lot of the same problems that many people who came back have. You know, like flashbacks and malaria. Like, he had malaria, but like fears of heat, and he had to kill people with his bare hands and stuff, and he still deals with that. He had substance abuse problems. And so, because it was on TV, people saw the soldiers, citizens saw the soldiers as not American soldiers, but as like bad people, right? In World War II, even if you're doing the same thing, it wasn't reported the same way, which brings up the question, which one, do we not talk about it or do we talk about it? Do we expose the stuff or do we not expose the stuff? So.
Aren't a lot of the homeless people now vets from?
There are a lot of homeless people in Washington, D.C., especially who are vets. Yeah. There are a lot of people who are homeless are vets. We finally the unemployment rate for vets is now finally below the national unemployment rate, but it hasn't always been. The Army and the Defense Department is doing a much better job about mental health due to war, like PTSD. Usually PTSD was considered sort of a made-up, weak person's excuse for why you're having problems, but today it's considered obviously more serious. When I say PTSD, you know what I'm talking about? Post-traumatic stress disorder. I know a guy, my best friend Kathleen's sister's husband he was a Marine. He's been in almost 20 years. And when you look at this guy, the only job this guy could have is Marine. His forearms look like Popeye. I mean, he's huge. He's gigantic. He has no neck. He can pick up this school and shake it. He was one of the first ones in Iraq in 2003. He's had several tours in Iraq and several tours in Afghanistan. And like, I've been to, like, they have a pool, so we'll go to their house and we hang out at the pool. And he has these scars all over him where he's like been in actual knife fights and been knifed and stuff, and he has scars. And yeah, like, I'm like, this is the one where I had my appendix taken out. And he's like, this is the one where an enemy stabbed me and then I turned it on him, right? His stories are a little bit more dramatic than mine. But he had PTSD. He was, he went forward, he kept fighting, obviously, he went back on tours. But he was going in and his best friend next to him blew up. And one of his jobs when the battle was over, he literally had to go around and pick up pieces of his friend. I mean, imagine your best friend in the world, right? And you have to pick up nose, cheekbone, part of a leg, right? And put it in a thing so they can put it in a coffin to be buried. That has a very, very real mental impact. So anyway, I thought that would be a way for us to, that'd be a nice way for us to start your week. If you want to go back and real quickly, actually on your notes you see where it says Vietnam War, where it says France and Dien Bien Phu and Ho Chi Minh. We're going to start there. What was Dien Bien Phu? Do you guys remember? Yeah, it was a battle where France was finally defeated. Remember, the Vietnamese had been fighting people for years and years and years. Well, I know what you're asking. How many Vietnam maps do we have?
Two seconds.
Just right next to each other. Pretty awesome. So you can see up her. That's not a bad place to put it. You can see up here. I'll move this over, Hannah, so you can see it.
Turn the camera.
Sorry, Leah. Is this going to be okay?
Start convulsing.
Leah's gonna. That was my movement. One sound. Special effect. Here is Dien Bien Phu in 1954. The Vietnamese finally defeated the French, and they had been fighting the French before, then the Japanese, and then the French. We were basically paying for the French to fight. A huge portion of our defense, not a huge portion, but a very large amount of money of our defense budget was going to help this. What was the whole theory? Why were we making sure that Vietnam didn't fall?
The domino theory.
The domino theory, right? What was the domino theory?
If one falls, they keep falling.
Yeah, if one country falls like Vietnam, then Cambodia, then Laos, and Thailand, and on and on and on, right? The domino theory, I guess, my aunt, who I love to death, who's my godmother, she's in town. We were going somewhere yesterday, and there was a Pizza Hut box that had pizza in it still, and my aunt goes, "Ooh, what's in the Pizza Hut box?" And we go, "It's pizza." She goes, "Oh, wow, where's it from?" Pizza Hut. Okay.
I'm not really sure how
Oh,
the story
what
was
is
related.
that?
Do what?
What is that story?
Domino.
No.
Okay.
That's where I got that. All right. It's all right. All right. So when they're kicked out, the leader of the North Vietnamese was a guy named Ho Chi Minh. Today, Saigon, which was the capital of South Vietnam, is now called Ho Chi Minh City. Ho Chi Minh had literally been fighting and leading the resistance for decades. Do you know who first commented that he thought that Ho Chi Minh was a man of high character? Woodrow Wilson. That's how old this fellow was. He was really old. What Ho Chi Minh wanted was better education. He wanted, when you think about like a Stalinist type of communist or a Maoist, that's not really what Ho Chi Minh was. He was more just, leave us alone. We want to have farms and like communal farms. We want to have better education. We want to have better health care. We sort of radicalized him through our pressure. And one thing that happened was after Dien Bien Phu, the Geneva Conference in 1954 occurred, and it was agreed upon that the country would be divided along the 17th parallel, right between North and South. And in 2 years, they would have elections, countrywide, full countrywide elections, and they would unify. So 1956 rolls around. We had appointed a guy, we had helped put in place a guy named Ngo Diem. Ngo Diem was a pro-American. He was pretty brutal. He was very anti-communist. He was Catholic. And he was pretty brutal, especially to a lot of the monks, and took away a lot of religious sort of power. Wednesday. When I say tomorrow, I'm just going to always from now on mean the next day you're here. Okay? I'm going to show you the YouTube video. Have you ever seen the monk set himself on fire in protest?
Yeah.
Self-molestation. I'm going to show you guys that. It's pretty brutal. This is what they have online. That was not in response to America, nor was it in response to North Vietnamese. That was a monk who was burning himself in response to the guy that was pro-American. Not long after that, that was in the 60s, not long after that, Kennedy had him assassinated. And then not long after that, he was assassinated. But in the 1956 election coming up, Ngo Diem decided we're not going to have elections. So the agreed upon Geneva Conference of 1954, the war is over, right? We're going to have these elections. We're going to unify the country. Well, who do you think was going to win the election? Ngo or Ho? Mo was going to win the election, right? In Vietnamese culture, your surname is your first name. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sort of like in Korean culture, you know, the name is passed down as your surname, like Kim, like Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un, like that's what they passed down. Who now is friends with Dennis Rodman. Did you guys see that? Is that not the most ridiculous thing in the world?
Yeah, it's the most ridiculous thing in the world.
It really is the most absurd thing. Like they're hugging and giving like bro slaps and stuff.
You
And
hear what, like, Dennis Rodman was like, yeah, Kim Jong had a message from Obama. Just call him. He just wants you to pick up the phone and call him. He's a nice guy. He's reasonable.
friend for life is what they call them.
Yeah. And then George Stephanopoulos was interviewing him this morning. It was like, now, you said you would love him forever. Was that before or after you knew that he said that he would destroy the United States?
What did Rodman say?
It was all like, well, I don't agree with some of the stuff he does, and I'll have a talk with him about it.
I'm totally gonna tweet him up in a little bit.
Yeah. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Dennis Rodman, you know who Dennis Rodman is? Dennis Rodman was an NBA player for a long time. He became increasingly more absurd as a human as time went on. He was the first one to be tatted up everywhere. Just had nose rings and rings all over the place. His hair, he always had his hair different colors. He rarely ever scored, but he was always the rebounding champion. Like for like 9 straight, he was 6'9", and he was the rebounding champion, and he would average like between 15 and 17 rebounds a game. He was ridiculous. He was on Jordan's team for a couple of years, and he won 2 world championships with the Pistons, and then with the Bulls, and he just became increasingly more absurd as a human, and he started dating. He dated Madonna for a while. He dated what's that chick? Carmen Electra for a while. He married Carmen Electra. He married Carmen Electra, and they had just been married for a little bit. She walks in. He is.